Jimmy fails to win 3 in a row, but a Busch wins the Spring Atlanta race for a 3rd year in a row. As Stewart Haas is still not doing so well, and it's a tough race for the RCR and Hendrick teams. Should Carl have been punished, or should he have been punished more severely? I'll show off my new die-cast car, and we'll update you on the fantasy points. All that and more next on Tyler Totten Live. Hello YouTube and welcome to Tyler Totten Live. I'm your host Tyler Totten, and alongside me is my chief analyst Tyler Stoner. Jimmy Johnson doesn't have a comeback win, but Kurt Busch won the Cobalt Tools 500 for the 2nd year in a row. This year just seems to be starting out like every other year. We have a surprise Daytona 500 winner, Jimmy Johnson dominates, and a Busch brother wins the Spring Atlanta race. Stoner, do you think that this year's just going to turn out the same as every other year, or do you think we're actually going to see other drivers in victory lane?
We are going to see other drivers in victory lane. First team I know of that pops in my head is Richard Childress. They've been running good. Well, but the most of the team has been running good, but Kevin Harvick's really had a good year so far, and I really think he's going to get a win. If it ain't going to be in Bristol, it's going to be pretty soon. And that's just the team I really think who's going to be in victory lane. They had a bad year last year, but they've come back, and yes, they're running pretty good.
All right. I see one main player in 2 of the 3 Spring Atlanta races besides Kurt Busch. The crew chief Steve Addington. He was with Kyle Busch for the first 2 races, and now he's with Kurt Busch. Is this track, Atlanta, set up for Steve Addington's liking, so where he knows where the cars, how to set up the car and everything, or is there still momentum with the Busch brothers coming off of their run at their hometown track, Las Vegas?
It's 50-50 between crew chief and both the Busch brothers. They always usually do well at Atlanta, and considering Steve Addington's just a new crew chief for Kurt Busch, and they just do well together, and yes, it's basically yeah.
Stewart Haas still isn't doing well, with Stewart having 0 top 5s, 2 top 10s, and no wins. He's 8th in the points, and his teammate Ryan Newman is 29th in points with 0 top 5s and 0 top 10s and no wins. Is there bad luck due to the sophomore slump we hear so much about, or is the Hendrick equipment failing them like it has been some of the individual Hendrick organization teams?
I think so far right now it's the Hendrick engines, because all the Hendrick drivers have had problems with their cars, and since Tony Stewart is using Hendrick engines, and Ryan Newman has wrecked a couple times, Tony Stewart's doing pretty good, but I really think it's the engine right now, because they did really good last year. Both of them made the chase, so I really think it's the engines.
I mean, do you think it's more the engines or just the whole car in general, like chassis setup, and then of course the engine and all the things that contribute to the car?
Well, I think, in my opinion, it's just the engine, because everything else seems to work just fine.
All right. Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski got into it at Atlanta, and Carl Edwards received a 3-race probation. Do you think that the punishment was too much, or because NASCAR did say that they were going to be able to police themselves, or do you think that he should have got a harsher penalty?
Should have been harsher, in my opinion, because that was a cheap shot on Carl Edwards' part. It did start out that Brad Keselowski did end up getting into Carl Edwards, but really it was Carl Edwards' fault from coming down on him, and it did push up Carl Edwards into Joey Logano. But when he did, Carl Edwards did wreck him. He could have hurt a lot of people. He could have hurt Brad Keselowski too, and that was just a cheap shot on his part.
I really have to disagree, because we've seen Brad Keselowski time after time after time wreck people with no intention of he's not thinking about whether they're going to be okay or what's going to happen to them or anybody else. He just wrecks them because he wants to win. He even said it when he got out in victory lane after wrecking Carl Edwards in the Nationwide Series at Memphis Motorsports Park, that it's racing, racing's hard, and you have to be aggressive to win races. Well, Carl Edwards just being aggressive. You know, we've seen Brad Keselowski wreck not only Carl Edwards in the Nationwide Series, but Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch. We've seen him wreck so many people.
But has he ever flipped any of them? The one at Talladega
reminds you of Talladega.
That was Carl Edwards' fault. He came down on Brad Keselowski. That's what I saw.
All right, moving off that very debatable subject. Well, I got one more thing to say about that. We all know that a lot of drivers are mad at Brad Keselowski for the people that he's wrecked, and I really do think that he's going to get wrecked a lot more this year.
I think he's in for it towards the Joe Gibbs people, Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch. That's just my opinion, random thought.
The RCR drivers didn't really perform as well as they normally have this year. Was this just a bad race for them, or do you think this is signs of what's going to happen later in the year?
The Childress racers, top the 3 races, they did not have a finish worse than 11th. They come into Atlanta, they have a bad day. But doesn't every driver have a bad day? I mean,
it wasn't just one driver. Kevin Harvick didn't really perform well throughout the whole day, but he did get a top 10 finish.
He came back from that, and that's very good for him. And the way he did last year, and it's really good the way he's running this year. I think he's doing really good.
I mean, it seemed that he had a better finish than his teammates because Jeff Burton finished 20th and Clint Bowyer finished 23rd. Clint Bowyer dropped 3 positions in the points, and I know Jeff Burton gained a couple. But
Clint Bowyer ain't as experienced as Kevin Harvick, and Jeff Burton's just, you gotta admit, getting old for the sport.
Mark Martin's a lot older than he is, though.
But he's on a Hendrick team. I mean, Richard Childress is a good team, don't get me wrong, but Mark Martin has some good equipment to get the job done.
All right. The Hendrick drivers had a ton of tire problems at Atlanta. Mark Martin lost a tire on the front stretch and spun out. Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon and Dale Jr. all had to keep making pit stops over and over and over again throughout the day because of tire issues. I mean, we've seen this happen throughout the whole year. Not specifically tire problems, but one little problem going wrong with the car, and then that ruins the whole driver's day. Do you think that this is going to keep repeating throughout the year, or do you think that the person who builds the car is going to realize his mistakes and make the car better?
It's gonna stop, and it's really the person who makes the tires. I mean, mistakes, and so far so good. I mean, he has achieved his goal in wrecking all the Hendrick drivers. So yeah, it's on purpose or something.
And we know that Stewart gets all of his equipment from Hendrick. And at Atlanta, him and Ryan Newman had issues. Ryan Newman lost an engine, and that was Ryan Newman's fault. But Stewart did have tire problems, and they did narrow it down to that was the Hendrick organization's fault for that. So, I mean, do you think that that his team may be able to diagnose the problem a little more in depth and fix it before the Hendrick team does?
No, it's going to be Hendrick because they know the engine a little bit more better than Tony Stewart does.
I mean, it's not just the engine. It was the chassis. That was the problem.
Well, still, I mean, Hendrick, they still know the car a little bit better, and they're going to figure it out, and they're going to get back on track.
All right, we'll be right back with more Tyler Totten Live after this.